record level really high, and I'm like, no, I'm too loud.
I'm way too loud.
Let's keep it. Poor George gonna hear these giant in the...
Oh, this is great. I might. It's gonna, because I've read through this just the one time, but then I kept adding stuff. So when I read through it again, I might make some mistakes because I was just so excited. I just kept adding stuff and then changing it, and then that's right.
No problem whatsoever. You tell me when you're ready, and we will hit the record.
Sweet. I'm ready.
All right. Shall we sync our Duvalakis?
Let's do it.
Do you want to count us down this time?
I can count us down. 3, 2, 1, go.
Yay! Welcome back to episode 0.2.
It is.
Prairie Dog 2.
Our Testisode 2.
So let's imagine the beautiful music starting. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, whatever it's going to be.
Oh, why would we change it? You've just nailed it. That should be our opening theme.
Fuck paying anyone for music. So welcome everyone. That's our comedy queen Kate.
Hello. And that's our scare obsessed Dominique.
Dominique. And you're listening to
Shitting Bricks. Again, nailed that.
I'm working on it.
Oh my goodness me. All right. So this is obviously a podcast for those of us that like to talk shit and get scared.
Or as we like to say down under, shitting bricks or crapping your dacks or, yeah, that's enough.
Laying cable. Now, don't forget, guys, if you are listening, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast. It is a bit of fun.
Yep. And this goes a really long way. It helps keep this baby of ours alive, obviously.
Absolutely. And make sure that you jump onto the social media pages of Shitting Bricks Podcast. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter. We've probably got an email. I think there's a carrier pigeon service. Just get into it.
Oh my God, I just watched The Producers again last night, and that reminds me so much of Hitler Pigeon.
Oh my God, I flippin' love that musical. I think that's my favorite musical by far.
Yeah, I think they did a good job. And now, Look, we're talking about movies again already.
Oh my God. I think, we're definitely, this is heavily biased, heavily influenced by pop culture, films and television. Oh my gosh.
So how you doing, Kate? What's news?
Well, it's been a big day. I have 2 massive things that have happened to me so far today. Number 1, I had a shower.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a treat. Number 2, I'm wearing a bra.
On both titties or just one?
Both for now. But look, as these stories get, scarier and more exciting, one might just pop out. You never know.
Slip a nip. Speaking of boobies, we were discussing before about the beautiful quilt in the background of me. So for those that do go and watch our video, our grandmother made these quilts for us, and she used to have like record-breaking boobies.
Oh yeah.
So I'm glad that she's here with us. Her boobies are here with us. I don't know if they ever made bras to fit her, but
I think I remember having to she had to get them specially made.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, but generations of babies fell asleep on her chest. Oh. She had a special skill, that's for sure.
Sleeping pillows. Well, I'm glad that you're feeling super supported today. I am currently commando at the moment, so I'm sorry I'm not in there with solidarity, but
that's okay.
Next time.
Yeah, look, see how you go. It's just what you feel. We've been in lockdown for half of our adult life, so you just do what you need to do.
I need to let the puppies breathe.
So true. All right, excellent. So, look, why don't I just jump into what we're going to have a bit of a conversation about today? How do you feel about the idea of me jumping into this story, Dominic?
I think that's great, but before we do, I should give a little bit of a disclaimer for our listeners.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder that, as you can already tell, we love to have a laugh. I mean, we are pretty funny. We think so. But these stories often involve some very serious or horrific events. So we mean no disrespect to the victims, survivors, or their loved ones. We just think humor is a really powerful way to help people process and cope and even heal. So if you don't understand this, you won't understand us. So just move the fuck along.
Exactly right.
So what's our theme, Kate?
Well, our theme this week is something called dementophobia. And dementophobia, now that is it involves a fear of madness or insanity. So people who have this fear, they're afraid they're going insane or they're losing touch with reality.
Is this a personal attack?
I think that it could be. It could be a personal attack. No, look, when we were doing a bit of research for this show, I actually asked my mum what are some of the things that freak her out. And she said to me, she was just sort of really thinking about it. And she was kind of looking off into the distance. And then she was like, if you were in an insane asylum, but you weren't crazy, how would you convince them that you're not crazy? And I couldn't agree more. That's terrifying. That certainly makes me feel really uncomfortable. So I thought, well, why don't we have a bit of a look into this? And, it's always nice to start with the definition. People like to define things. So the clinical term, according to Google, I could be wrong, is dementophobia. So it's, that idea that you are going insane or you might be insane, or maybe you feel like you're completely sane, but people don't believe you. It's probably one of the worst nightmares that you can sort of consider. So
good on Kaz. She totally had the right idea. Good on her. I think that's amazing.
Sometimes she freaks me out a little bit because she's so cute and hilarious, and she's like so smart. So when you ask her about these sorts of things, she'll really think about it. And then about 15, 20 minutes later, I went to see her again, and she's just sitting there like she's freaking out. I was like, Mum, stop thinking about the things now. That's enough. You don't need to think about things that scare you anymore. So I had to, pull her off the dementophobia cliff, bring her back to real life. So look, doing my research into this, you can look at so much stuff, and I got into that a little bit. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. Suffice to say that if you were alive in the 1800s, so if you're around and you were like a criminal or you're a little bit kooky, things weren't great for you. That's what I've learned. So to give you a little bit of a background, so I had a bit of a look at Australian institutions. So Australia had a lot of insane asylums or mental institutions. I think it's got something to do with the fact that ships and ships and ships filled with convicts landed on our shores. And they didn't
just send them all here.
Yeah, just send them all here. That's fine. The supposed empty country where nobody lived before they send all these convicts. I say that with complete sarcasm, by the way. So essentially in Australia, there was criminals, idiots, or lunatics. So basically my friendship group were all bundled together in a jail. So whatever the town jail was for where they were all just put in together. So if they were a nuisance or a menace to the community, they were just shipped off. Let's put them all into a jail. But then in Australia, so New South Wales specifically, 1811, a mental asylum was established. And they tried to separate those who were criminals from those who were mentally ill. The issue was they didn't really know how to run the institution for those that were deemed mentally ill. So they essentially hired untrained wardens that were just huge in physical stature. That was it. That was just the only hiring, requirement. Are you ginormous and are you intimidating?
Just get James Gandolfini to do all of
exactly right. So yeah, basically you can imagine the treatment that these mentally ill patients would have received if there's untrained James Gandolfinis running around this institution. Hey, what are you doing?
Hey, what are you doing?
Hey. That was probably one of the worst James Gandolfinis ever. Sorry. All right, so that's the sort of, beginning in terms of how they determined what they were going to do with people deemed mentally ill. In 1843, so again, 1800s, not a great time, the Lunacy Act was introduced in Victoria. So I love that language as well, but when I first looked at it, I thought the Lunacy Act, this is going to be really bad. Turns out it was a piece of legislation that shifted the conceptualization of mental illness and actually explained that these patients needed medical treatment and they needed the government to care for them. So poor choice of name, maybe word, but look, it's 1843. So they haven't quite, shifted into more modern language.
Yeah, they've still got rats coming after them and shit. So
yeah, exactly right. So look, that was a good piece of legislation, which sort of changed the perspective on that. I can't imagine that it flooded through the entire world, that people started to think that people needed treatment rather than just to have the shit kicked out of them. But yeah, look, that was a good move forward. Then after the war, so in 1950, 1970, that was the introduction of happy pills. So all of the medications that, were, chosen to treat mentally ill patients.
I've got nothing against pills.
Look, there was so many, that was leaps and bounds. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the happy pills that they, prescribed, they were essentially designed so that they could send people back out into the community. So, it's a good thing, but then I don't know, also, I don't know if it's a great thing. I don't really know. I don't know enough about it, but at the time there was still a real lack of understanding of how to help people. I mean, it's certainly it helped in that sense that, they could give them a bit of hope and actually get them out of these institutions, which is what you would want. Because I can't imagine. Anyway, I can't imagine being trapped in one of those places.
It's a step in the right direction. It's like, okay, they need medical help. Okay, his pills might be, or this could be a solution. I think it's just not looking at the whole holistic journey, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's trial and error of a lot of different things. And each time they try one thing, they find a new thing out about mental health. And then, okay, so we got to start back from the beginning or change things up. But very curious to know how these institutions play a role and what happens.
That's it. Yeah, and look, to be honest as well, the next step, so in the 1980s and 1990s, the government started to realize these places not great. They're not really good. They're just helping a lot of people make scary films, and they're really just breeding ground for the wrong type of treatment.
So what we're saying, 1-2-star reviews, not coming back.
Beds are uncomfortable. Didn't have a great view. Definitely don't recommend. Minibar was subpar at best.
The power would come off and on a lot.
That's it. Oh, bless. Imagine that writing an Airbnb review for.
That's exactly where my mind goes to.
It just makes me think, because we have a couple of, asylums not in operation, just for those of you that are concerned that Australia is behind the times. definitely not in operation, but particularly in sort of Ballarat, Ararat, those western areas of Victoria, there's still ones that you can go to visit. And all I think of is the cold corridors, the walls that were painted green because apparently green was a soothing color. You know what? If I'm in a 2x2 room and I'm freezing cold and I'm jacked up on psychotropics, I don't think I'm going to be too concerned about the color of the fucking walls. I don't think that's going to help.
Well, I could give you some insight because I'm recording from one of these places as we speak.
Yeah. What an actual an abandoned asylum.
Yeah. But funny you mentioned that, and sorry, movies are coming back into it again. I watched the Return to Oz movie last night, and do you remember how horrifying the start of that was? It's this little girl strapped down, she's hooked up to an electric machine, she goes through green corridors, and it fuels the rest of the story of the Wheelers. Do you remember the bad guys, the Wheelers? Yes. These evil things rolling around on the screeching wheels that reminded her of the wheels of the bed that she was on. Oh, anyway, totally on brand today. But I wouldn't have given them a 5-star review. And definitely it's a choice of style and design that they were going for.
Well, why don't they go for like some throw cushions or, maybe some more indoor plants? Rather than just let's just paint the walls green.
Fucking Monastera would have totally saved the day. Peace.
Throw your lunacy act in the bin, idiots. Get some Monsteras up in there.
Well, what have we learned from all these lockdowns, honestly?
That we need more psychotropic drugs?
Well, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that
anyway. Sorry, I digress.
That's fine. Look, so in Australia, the 1980s, 1990s, they started to deinstitutionalize these places. So their scope of work changed. They were like, look, just chucking them in here and locking them up is not really helping. Let's try and shift to something that is a little bit more, all-encompassing or holistic, as you said earlier, Dom. So, focusing on education and treatment and getting people in the community and, essentially not just locking people up to try to actually help them. I was born in 1988 and Dom, you were born in when?
86.
86. So we were alive when there were still active institutions. So that kind of blows my mind a little bit because you think of these things as archaic. Obviously I was talking about the 1800s earlier. That, makes sense. We're talking about the 1980s, 1990s. So there's people who are alive now that potentially, well, almost certainly would have spent time in some of these places potentially at some point in their life.
Oh, yeah. The people from my community were still being locked up for just being gay. That was a mental illness. And
that's exactly right. And it's just, that's the other side of it too, I suppose, because, when I'm sort of thinking about this and I'm reading about mental illness, you are thinking about, people that are, suffering from like schizophrenia or suffering from delusions or suffering from, trauma that's caused them to respond in a certain way. So that could potentially have an impact on their personality. It could have an impact on the way that they behave or things like that. And then you're thinking of people that are being locked up for being gay because that's a mental illness. How do you convince someone you're not crazy? That's just your orientation. Like that, again, you're trapped in a place with no way of convincing people that you're just fine.
Yeah. Wives, mothers that were depressed, lock them up, unhealthy, give them some shock therapy, drug them up. Yep, it wasn't that long ago. So it's a perfect tie into the theme. So, I can't wait to hear more. Tell me.
All right. So back to the 1800s, because, naturally there was a lot going on in terms of the understanding of what mental illness was and how to treat it or how to treat people that were put into these places. So one of the people that I didn't stumble upon, I had heard of this person before, so I wanted to read a little bit more about it, but it's Nellie Bly. Now, Nellie Bly was essentially pioneered investigative journalism. For those of you that might have seen The West Wing, which, you should if you haven't, season 2, episode 5, Abby Bartlett goes to Cochrane's Mills, Pennsylvania, to dedicate a statue to Nellie Bly because she pioneered, investigative journalism, which I'll link back into our topic shortly. But essentially, Cochrane's Mills, Pennsylvania, was named after Nellie Bly's family. So they had a lumber mill there, and she was very sort of well off, but she was passionate about sharing with people, what was sort of happening in the world, or what's an important story to tell, or how can I make some change. So in 1887, again, not a great time for anybody, she was 23, and she had herself committed to a New York asylum so that she could try to expose the conditions of the patients that were there.
Oh my God, I'm getting American Horror Story from this completely.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest, as I was doing a little bit more research, there is a film. So she wrote the series that she wrote for the World, the New York World newspaper, was 10 Days in a Madhouse. So there is a film called 10 Days in a Madhouse, which I'm going to watch pretty much straight after we've recorded this episode. But yes, she wanted to expose the conditions of what was going on inside of these asylums, because nobody really knew what was going on. Nobody questioned it. It was just, let's try and solve this problem, and let's just chuck people into a place. As I was reading, you can find all of the articles online, by the way. I strongly recommend to anyone listening that you read them, because it details her journey of actually getting into this place. One of the beginning of her articles, she explains that she had read of abuses in these institutions. She thought that they were exaggerated or romances, but she really wanted to know 100% what was going on. So she shuddered to think how completely the insane were in the power of their keepers, and how one could weep and plead for release and all of no avail if the keepers were so minded. So she accepted the mission to figure out what was going on inside the Blackwell Island asylum. She asked her editor before she went, "How will you get me out after I get in?"
Hello, number one question, get me the fuck out here. She's about to release her first single, Man Eater.
Exactly.
Like, Nellie's got some royalties coming her way. She wants to get out.
How's she going to drop those sweet beats if she's stuck in Blackwell Asylum? So the editor said, "I don't know." That doesn't instill very much confidence. And then said, "But we'll get you out if we have to tell them who you are and for what purpose you feigned insanity just to get in." You're putting all of your faith. So this makes me really concerned. You're putting all of your faith in the fact that these people who are keeping you in the asylum make the choice whether to release you or not. So even if the editor marched up to the front gate and knocked on the door and said, "Nellie Bly's in there, she's actually like a reporter, you need to let her out," they might be like, "No, she's not. She's this bird because she's absolutely off her rocker. So see you later, buddy." And that's it.
Yeah.
What do you do? Okay. So it makes me feel a little bit sick. It's so terrifying. But as I went on to read a little bit more about Nellie Bly, so she essentially had to pretend to be crazy. So the journey was she pretended to be crazy. She went to almost like a halfway house for poor and destitute women. So she went there because there was a couple of ways she could do it. She could either get her friends or family to commit her, or she could do it on her own and kind of forge her own path. So she decided she didn't want to bring her family and friends into that. She didn't want to act crazy in front of them to freak them out. So she just kind of went and did her own thing. So she went to this way
to do it.
Well, that's it. Yeah. I think because then the flip side of that is once you've acted like you're crazy to your friends and family, will they ever believe that you aren't?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. So I'm just freaking myself out over here. So she decided to go to a halfway house, so a place, poor, destitute people. A lot of refugees, immigrants would go to these places, and then she started to, act crazy. So she would sort of repeat herself in conversation. She was obsessed about finding her luggage trunks. She was demanding that people find them and bring them to her. She was explaining that she was from Cuba. She would sort of say her surname was one thing and then another. And so that was her first few days at this women's shelter. And then they take her in front of a judge to determine what's up with her. So she does that, and they say, yeah, she's not well. So they put her into Bellevue Hospital for a few days. That's kind of when it started for her, where she started to realize how people were treated in these situations. So at Bellevue, they're forced to eat old, moldy, spoiled food. And if you didn't eat it, then you didn't eat at all. They were, roughly handled, moving from any point in the hospital, strapped to the beds if felt necessary. It was basically whatever the nurses or the attendants decided. She was then interviewed a few times. So doctors would interview her, and she convinced them. She convinced them that she was crazy and that she needed to be put into the Blackwell Asylum, which is, pretty impressive. So she's 23 years old, don't forget.
What? She's 23. Oh my
She's
God.
23.
I had lost the plot by then. Anyway, I'd start to believe the crap that I was saying. Like, no.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So she literally is 23 years old and just wants to do this for a story. Like, she feels it's so important to tell the story of these people, that she's putting herself through all of this. So she goes to Blackwell, and she makes friends with lots of her inmates. There's psychological abuse, physical abuse. Patients are forced to take ice cold baths and then sleep in their wet clothes, which then they would get really sick naturally. They were forced to sit still on benches or chairs. They couldn't speak or move. That would be for 12 hours or more. Some people were tethered together with ropes, and then they had to sort of like pull carts around like mules, so physical labor. Food and sanitary conditions are horrific. Rotten meat, moldy stale bread, contaminated foods. And anyone who complained was beaten. Bly was even explaining that, there was the threat of sexual violence by the staffers. So even the threat, and no doubt the enactment of that sort of violence would be enough to, she's sane, and yet she's observing this or witnessing this, and it would start to make you question your own.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Your own capacity to deal. What the devastating thing was is that Bly realized that a lot of the inmates, they weren't insane at all. They were mostly immigrants. They were mostly women, and they were caught up in the law enforcement system, but they couldn't speak the language. So no one understood them. So they just locked them up. It was basically, no family to support you. You're poor and you don't speak our language. You're insane. See you later. And just thrown into these places. But what Bly also realized is that these, immigrants and poor people, majority women, they weren't crazy or insane when they went in, but they get to the asylum, and the treatments that they're given and the psychological damage that was provided to them forced a lot of them to then fall into that. So it's like the reverse, where it's like, hang on, I've gone into this because I was trying to escape from, a country that was, putting my life at risk. And basically the treatment in this place causes them to become crazy.
It breaks people. It's torture.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly right. Yeah, I was also having a look at like one of the articles when Bly was explaining that one of the patients was unable to make herself understood. So she was German, so she couldn't speak in English. And Bly said, "Can such carelessness be excused? I wonder when it's so easy to get an interpreter. If the confinement was for a few days, then one might question the necessity, but there was a woman that was taken without her consent from the free world to an asylum and given no chance to prove her sanity. Confined most probably for her life behind asylum bars without ever being told in her language why or what for. Compare this with a criminal who's given every chance to prove their innocence. Who would not rather be a murderer and take the chance for life than be declared insane without hope of escape?"
Preach.
Preach, Nellie Bly. So it was pretty incredible that she spent 10 days in this place. The good news story is that her actions and her article, forced the government to start an inquisition into this asylum. Now, the asylum got the drop, so they cleaned up the place before the inquisitions had started and the investigation was there. So they literally cleaned the place up. So they cleaned the walls and brought in fresh food and cleaned the patients and all of this BS.
And who's going to believe the patients?
Exactly. That's it. Fortunately, they believed our girl MB, Nellie Bly.
That's right.
And they started to provide more funding. And they cleaned out that whole place. Like, got rid of all of the people that were working there, and they also went through all of the patients and discharged so many people. They got interpreters so that people could be told what was going on,
What's going on,
why they were there. So it was pretty incredible. She managed to secure $1 million in funding, which in today's time is like $24 million.
Holy moly.
Yeah, so it's 1800s. $1 million bucks in funding over a year is it's crazy. Poor use of that word for the topic that we're talking about. It's wild.
But talk about being committed to something, and you think about the work that she did then, and yet that's the 1800s, and it still took until 1980 for us to shift fully away from all of this. And the stigma still of mental health is well and truly rampant, but at least we're not locking people away anymore. But there's a slew of other problems which you don't have time to go into. But
no. We would need to have a whole separate podcast series for that. I completely agree. But you're right, over 160 years of this information being known, and it was a slow road, but she certainly paved the way in a sense. In addition, she completed the round-the-world trip in 72 days, beating Jules Verne's 80-day record. So go her. She's just a pioneer.
Badass boss woman getting shit done.
That's it. That is it. So there's been other experiments that are sort of not necessarily similar, but along the same lines as Nellie Bly. So there is there's another sort of quite famous one, which was the Rosnahan experiment. So this was a psychology professor from Syracuse University, and he arranged for a group of people to voluntarily, admit themselves so that they could get some inside information, I suppose. Essentially, the question was, how do you tell the difference between someone that's sane and insane? That was the question that he was asking. So he admitted himself, and they would say that they had the same kinds of symptoms. So it's also known as the thud experiment. So they would say that they had, that they heard voices. So that it was hollow, it was a thud, and it was, voices in their head, that they were just saying those words over and over again. What it ended up proving is that essentially you can just deceive people if you choose to. So whilst he was the Rosnahan experiment was really about trying to, debunk the professionalism and the usefulness of psychiatrists and mental health doctors, which obviously angered the community, but it made people question it a lot as well, which was, a good thing in a way, because we should always question practices of people, or particularly when it comes to health. You've got the right to questioning it, second opinions, and do what's right for you. But a lot of people were not happy with Rosnahan and the study that, according to another scientist, is, I don't know, where's her name? Susanna Callahan. She basically said, look, you can deceive people. It didn't really prove anything, because the level of deception from each of the people that were in these asylums or these institutions was rampant. So it's really difficult to determine what that actually achieved. But they were, again, willing to put themselves into that situation where if you pretend that you are not mentally stable and then you decide you don't want to be there anymore, how do you convince someone that you're fine?
Not to downplay their treatment or anything like that. Obviously, that is scary and terrifying, and as all the rest. But I think it's the fear of not being able to get out. I think what this topic, the moment for me is that, oh my God, I may actually stay here, or maybe I am unwell.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
I should stay here.
Exactly. You start to question yourself, and that's the scarier part. Being stuck in your own brain and trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong. I don't want to be stuck in my own brain, Dom. Do you want to be stuck in your own brain?
No, not yours, not mine, not anyone's. Sorry about it. Make me a celestial being. That would be lovely.
Yeah, I would like to be a ball of gases.
Yeah. Not a being, a bean. A green bean just floating around. Yeah, why not? Pimento
bean, black bean, whatever you want.
Oh, I like black beans.
Yeah, same. It's making me think of Mexican food, which when I said, I want to be a ball of gases, that's what I thought of as well, as Mexican food.
There you go.
It usually has that effect on me. You're welcome, everyone. Still looking for sponsors. So Taco Bell.
El Paso, please.
El Paso. Oh.
Mission Foods. I want some corn chips, please.
Oh, my God. So when I was, so to continue on my research, I did type the question into Google. What would you do if you were in an insane asylum or a mental asylum, and you had to try to convince people that you were sane? And a lot of people responded to that. So I found a thread where people explained that they had been in that situation. It wasn't quite, naturally, this is, in more modern times. So these are institutions or facilities that don't beat people up for no reason and don't put you in a straitjacket. But there is still the element of, if you're, involuntarily admitted, you can't leave unless somebody, provides you with the authority to leave. So you can't just check yourself out like another hospital. So one of the stories that I was looking at was a young girl who was 16, and she went to a party and she had too many recreational drugs, and she overdosed, and her parents, she didn't overdose, but she overdosed but survived. And her parents, they admitted her because they believed that she was trying to commit suicide. She wasn't, but that was their interpretation of what had happened with her behavior. So, they put her into a facility with involuntary admission. So this young girl, who at the time of writing this was 34 years old, so she was reflecting on what had happened to her. But she explained that as she rehabilitated after being put into this facility, she came to learn that suicide was an act that gets you a free, all expenses paid trip to a psychiatric care unit. No matter the fact that I'd protested the event as a dosage mishap and not an attempt on my life, I was admitted into the unit as an involuntary patient. The thing that no one understood that was, while I did suffer with emotional health issues, I was working through them because I actually loved life. I'd not tried to commit suicide.
Mm.
The first days were the hardest. I was stripped of my liberties and was confined to the facility. My luggage meticulously searched for blades and drugs. They took away all solvents like hairspray and deodorant, anything that I might use to harm myself. It was humiliating. I went on to spend a month in the unit, and it was wasted on me. I wasn't diagnosed with any mental health issues by the psychiatrists. I wasn't medicated, and I didn't need that level of care. But what I took from that were many of the stories of the staff and their convictions that brought them to work with youth struggling with mental health, and of the other young people who were genuinely in need of care. They were struggling with life beyond anything that I had known. So that was a story that it just resonated with me because, you know, this is someone that was put into that facility because her parents believed that she needed that level of care.
Mhm.
Turns out that she didn't, you know, but to have them in an institution like that where she was able to observe and witness people that were there that did need that type of care, I feel like that's really powerful.
It reminds me of a story of when I was in high school and was taken to a hospital in Melbourne somewhere, and one of our listeners is going to remember the name of this, so please let us know. But it was like a gallery, and all the patients were obviously given the opportunity to paint and draw and get creative, and they had exhibitions or, you know, sections where people who suffer from schizophrenia, all their artwork and what it did to their work, and people that suffer from depression, and all these, you know, all these different patients and all the different type of work that came out of it. And I still to this day remember it so vividly, and the quality of work is varied quite wildly, but it was really interesting to see how the similarities and the things that people from different, you know, conditions suffer, and what's, you know, perception of self, for instance, or all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I hope it's still out there because I'd love to go and see it again. But it was on the side of an old hospital, an old facility, and then it's been turned into this gallery, I believe.
Yeah. Wow. And that's the sort of things that stay with you. You know, even when I was doing some reading about this, that sounds incredible.
Yeah, I'll have to find it and share it.
Yeah.
But
also, I just thought I would give a shout out. That story was written by Leah Frost. So it was popped up on to a website 2 years ago, but that is her story.
Thanks for sharing, Leah.
Thanks, Leah. Thank you for allowing me to include that into some of our research. So the crux of the research and story that we were looking at into dementophobia today is in the 1800s, insane asylums, not the greatest place to go. I give it 0.5 stars, would not recommend, would not visit again. More so in the 2000s, we have a wealth of resources and organizations, Black Dog Institute, Beyond Blue. There's so many. I haven't even written enough down, but I would definitely ask people to use those amazing organizations if needs be, because there's certainly leaps and bounds since little Nellie Bly was sitting at Blackwell Asylum in New York City.
Yes.
We've come a ways.
Yeah, and I just also think about how privileged we are to live in Australia and the care that we do, the universal healthcare that we do have access to. And then also it reminds me of seeing people on the street, people experiencing homelessness, and it gets my goat going. What's the saying?
It gives you a goat.
Something about a goat.
I think it's gets my goat.
There we go. Something goat related. When people use terms like someone is technically, the word crazy is not the and or someone's having a moment or anything like that, and you see these people on the streets that just need to be taken care of, like the first step of kindness first before judging people, or even seeing things on TikToks where they're making fun of people where I'm just like, I can't handle it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are the people that would have been locked up and locked away and totally mistreated, whereas I'm glad that is not as rampant as it was, but Anyway, thanks so much for sharing, Kate. I'm all
Hey, no
jittery.
problems.
Literally jittery. I'm just like, oh, that
It makes
trapped
me want
feeling.
to I know. And the other thing that Nellie Bly did, which again we're going to slide into the movies and pop culture, that whole 10 Days in a Madhouse, that was essentially the basis for the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So there's been so many films and TV shows and things like that really delve into this side of people's brains that they don't trust or that they don't, and it is it's a real fear. It is a bona fide fear, so it's easy for people to sort of manipulate in that way to make some entertaining and horrendous stuff, a lot of which I don't watch because I don't want to be in my own brain, please.
It reminds me of American Horror Story, whichever one it was, where I think Sarah Paulson's character is trapped, or some characters trapped. There's also Girl Interrupted, which is an amazing movie, but also reminded me of this story. And I think there's an episode in Alias season 1 or 2 where she also, Jennifer Garner, she has to go undercover and she has to pretend to be unwell to find another agent. And it's like, it's horrid.
Yeah, absolutely. And then probably one of the most famous, kind of, I guess, sort of pop culture modern films is Shutter Island. By Scorsese, when you don't know, is Leo nuts? Is he not? Is Mark Ruffalo that hot in person? Like, we just don't know. There's all these questions that movie made us ask.
So what's our top tip for this week? Like, Kate, what would you say or what would you do to prove that Dominic's not crazy and get me out? Like, I will get you out. I will do this for you, but I want to know, what would you say?
I mean, if it was me, so if I'm in there, the number one thing as I'm doing this reading is you just do what they say. You just play by the rules. You don't try to, claim that you're not insane. You don't try to force them. Essentially, we have the benefit of not living in the 1800s, so we have access to telephones and things. So the overwhelming advice that I read was just do what they say, and if you've got access to a phone, try to call someone. So I would call you and be like, "Oh, babe, I've done it again. I'm in a bloody asylum."
I just end up telling them stories about you. I'll be like, "Look, I got video evidence. Look at the crazy shit she's done."
Oh my God. Yeah, it's truth. That's so true. But if you were there and you called me, I think that, I mean, just the fact that we would want to, I would go to the facility and be like, well, can I see him? And if you were, off your rocker, I'd be like, nah, just keep him there.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you're checking first before letting me loose out into the population.
Absolutely. I think that, we've certainly been let out loose into the population together. Unfortunately, that place that we were let loose was Las Vegas. So,
okay. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this episode because I do not want any of my Las Vegas stories getting out into the world just yet. Maybe when I'm old and decrepit and I'm trying to relive my youth. But yes.
Absolutely. All right, so what is our next what's our next episode, Dom? What are we vibing for our next Shit and Bricks pod?
Well, I think we've gotten a good vibe of our 2 test episodes to get into a bit of a rhythm and a groove and see what works and doesn't work. So I reckon we're going to actually do our first proper episode next week, and it's my turn, I believe, and I'm so excited to tell the story of Cannibal Island.
Yes! I'm so excited. Obviously not excited to think about cannibals, but yeah, sounds hot.
Get your bottle of Chianti and we will...
And fava beans. We were talking about beans earlier. Far out. How's that for a bookend? How's that for a bookend? We're just natural born storytellers.
Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you shat your bricks. Make sure to wipe, flush. Yep. Use your Aesop poo drops. Remember, another sponsor. You can get poo drops.
Oh my God! So not like VI poo? Is it the same sort of thing?
they've got these like smell be gone type droplets that you put in the toot afterwards, and it's meant to make everything smell really, really nice.
Oh
So
my
Aesop,
God.
as a
Aesop
sponsor.
drops. I
Yeah.
cannot wait to do an episode on toilets because that's something that I have a real phobia about as well. So when we do that one, we can really get those sponsors lined up. It's going to be an absolute thrill.
All right. Bye, everybody.
See you guys. Have a great week.
Stay safe.
Oh
my God.
So funny.
I'm trying to stop the recording. Stop recording.